Hello again, and welcome to the Phibbs the Druid podcast. I am your host, Phibbs, and in today's episode, I'm going to be asking the question, why is mono green so strong? So, this episode is going to be a little bit loose, a little bit open ended, a little kind of maybe traveling across this question and offering answers and my takes on why mono green is so strong. The first thing that I want to talk about is tutors. From things like cultivate to ramping growth. I know this is allowed in any color, but even things like evolving wilds and terramorphic expanse, from worldly tutor to green sun zenith, from sylvan scrying to sylvan tutor. I'd like to argue that although mono green has always had to reveal what we're looking for, and we can't just tutor for anything like black can do with vampiric tutor or demonic tutor, the benefits that come with green a lot of the time involve us just putting permanents directly into play. The reason that 4 and 5 color decks lean so heavily on green is for this very fact, because green can fix the problem of multicolored decks hitting their colors. But even though green can tutor for artifacts or enchantments, it can usually tutor for exactly what we need right when we need it. Cards like Fierce Empath or Protean Hulk can usually set up either a win the turn they come down, or the following turn if we're allowed to keep our board state. Even things like, everybody knows Birthing Pod is busted as a card, and it is a very, very powerful, repeatable tutor in green. Fierce Empath usually is going to go get your Wincon, your Craterhoof, or your Baby Hoof. Protean Hulk is a tutor for usually a couple combo pieces. If you pair Protean Hulk with Eldritch Evolution, you're probably close to winning or just jumping ahead so far on the value train that it will be hard to catch up to you. So let's just pump the brakes a little bit for a minute and think about this in relation to the other 4 colors' abilities to tutor as well. Because every color tutors differently, and we need to understand what distinguishes green from the other 4 colors of magic. White can tutor for artifacts and enchantments with cards like Enlightened Tutor. Blue allows players to search for instants and sorceries with spells like Mystical Tutor. Black allows players to tutor for anything they want, usually at the cost of some life, and perhaps most importantly without having to reveal what they tutored for, using cards like Imperial Seal or, as I mentioned earlier, Vampiric Tutor. Red is the most chaotic of all colors when it comes to tutors, but players can use this to their advantage if they're planning on reanimating or recurring their target somehow when they use cards like Gamble. So, talking about these iconic tutors, it really makes me think about what these colors want to accomplish, especially in relation to what green wants to accomplish. Each color is very unique in how it tutors, but I really want to highlight the fact that most of the colors either put the cards into hand or put them into graveyard potentially. Thinking of cards like Entomb, which just takes a creature and dumps it into the yard. It's a black tutor. Also, white, things like Open the Armory. You search your library for an aura or equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So again, it's going to hand. Solve the equation. Search your library for an instant or sorcery card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. I mentioned Entomb. Also, Reckless Handling is an interesting one in red, very much like Gamble. Search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle, then discard a card at random. If an artifact was discarded this way, Reckless Handling deals 2 damage to each opponent. So, there's a slight upside. You're not really going to kill anybody with that 2 damage if you get it, usually. So this distinction from green really illustrates to me just how the colors want to attack the game itself. White wants to attack through combat usually, very much like green, but it always allows opponents to know what they're up to, again like green. But they value keeping cards in hand a lot of the times, like answers, things like Source of Plowshares, Path to Exile, effects like Teferi's Protection, um, holding on to that Wrath of God effect until the board has been flooded, and then sweeping it all away, and now you're the white players establishing their board state. But white is almost it's very controlling. It's very much like black and blue in my opinion, which I think black, blue, and white are the control colors. No matter how you pair them together, even stand still by themselves. Blue wants to attack the game on the stack usually. Unlike green, unless green is employing flash, and usually allows opponents to know what they're up to. Also, again, like green, but blue is usually hoping the table forgot that they tutored for a mana drain two turns ago. And they probably value more than any other color keeping answers in hand, which is very much unlike green and is very controlling as well. Blue, if you're sitting across from that blue player and they've got 2 open blue mana, odds are they probably have a counterspell or a mana drain, or a way to poke a hole in your plan. Again, controlling color. Black wants to attack the game through deception, but not always. Unlike green, perhaps the most, as green is almost always revealing their game plan from the get-go because we're playing green. We're usually winning through combat. And more often than not, they do not reveal what they're up to and can vacillate between keeping cards in hand, on the battlefield, or in the graveyard, which is kind of like green, which can play from the yard in a limited way, and values the battlefield more than any other zone. Green does. Green very much values the battlefield. Black can also control with murder and exile spells a lot, which puts it into the control bucket again. As I stated earlier, I think Esper is really the control wedge. Red wants to attack the game either through direct damage on the stack or via combat, which makes it probably the most light green of all of the other colors. And it's always letting the rest of the table know what they're up to. Again, very much like green. Usually cares about cards in hand or on the battlefield to a limited degree. The graveyard as well, which again feels very much like green. Which brings us to green. Green wants to attack the game usually via combat on the battlefield, pretty exclusively. There are some exceptions with combos that can burn the board somehow or mill out opponents, but green always lets opponents know what they're up to. And even though green is capable of some large bursts of card advantage, green probably cares least about keeping cards in hand because green just wants to dump those cards onto the battlefield. It's a very permanent heavy color in general. So after reviewing the strengths and weaknesses and capabilities of each color, I've noticed, or I guess perhaps remembered, that green is the color that cares most about permanence and by extension cares most about the battlefield. I was already alluding to this. I know this is probably a Captain Obvious moment, but I'm seeing a deeper maybe why and how Esper is so frustrating to play against and why blue and black are the natural enemies of green. Esper, which is white, black, and blue, wants to interact. They want to control. They want to manipulate the battlefield, the stack, the graveyard, and sometimes people's hands as well. So they can take over late game when everybody else is out of the gas. But what happens when there's a player at the table with just too much gas? Like maybe a green player on an all creature deck, or even a teamer player on an all creature deck. Now, and look guys, before I move on, I just want to point out that even though a strategy works sometimes, maybe even a lot of times, like my all creature or all permanent strategies, which are very successful, it doesn't mean that there's always going to be a silver bullet in this game that's always going to win. Variance will inevitably deal you a bad hand, draw you the wrong half of your deck, or put you almost over the top, but not give you enough gas to seal the deal and close the game. But that's okay. We need to learn how to lose better. Because you got to give it up to your opponents for playing better or getting luckier or having more fun with their strategy than you were allowed to in this game. Every loss is an opportunity to learn, but it's also an opportunity to have fun still. This is a point that I keep coming back to in these videos about losing. So all that being said, again, let's ask the question, why is mono green so strong? Is it just tutors? Is it the awesome raw power of mono green mythics that are oftentimes the target of those tutors? Is it mono green's ability to push the boundaries of what is possible in the early game by jumping ahead multiple turns through putting additional lands into play or playing early mana dorks? Is it the abundance of mana dorks that green has access to? These are the questions that I'm currently wrestling with, and I don't quite have an answer. There isn't really a silver bullet here. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I do think it has a lot to do with generating so much resources early game, followed up with incredible bursts of card advantage mid game, like Rishkar's expertise, and streamlined, some might call boring, finishers late game like Craterhoof, and one of my new personal favorites, Glacier Godmaw. I love this card. 5 and green, creature Leviathan, 6/6 from Edge of Eternities, has trample. When this creature enters, create a lander token, which is essentially a rampant growth on a token. And it also has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance and haste until end of turn. I love this card, especially pairing it with things like Scapeshift or Lumra. But what part of this strategy, green strategy, is so intrinsically unique to green? I'd say it's the ramp. It's really the one thing that I can put my finger on. I'd say it's green's mana-hungry bombs that really force you in many ways to focus so much of the deck on lands and getting more lands into play as soon as possible. Again, this is kind of a Captain Obvious moment, but I think there is something deeper here. Something elegant and beautiful and complex and very inconspicuous. I can remember a moment back when I'd only been playing Commander for a few years, when I lost a game using a more complex multicolor deck. And I immediately switched to my Omnath Locus of Mana build. For those of you unfamiliar, Omnath Locus of Mana is the original Omnath. 2 and a green, legendary creature elemental. It's a 1/1. You don't lose unspent green mana as steps and phases end, and Omnath Locus of Mana gets +1/+1 for each unspent green mana you have. So I switched over to Omnath, and one of the more seasoned, and to be honest, more frustrating to play against players immediately noticed my deck change and said, "Oh, now you want to win." My build relied heavily on mana multipliers as well as winning via commander damage, but the main win con, and oftentimes the most reliable win con in that deck, was and still is Helix Pinnacle. Helix Pinnacle is a 1 green enchantment with Shroud. It has put X tower counters on Helix Pinnacle. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 100 or more tower counters on Helix Pinnacle, you win the game. I played this list a couple times at my LGS that summer, and my regular opponents were familiar with the list, especially because of how regularly I was able to win with Helix Pinnacle. And for some reason, a lot of them hated it, which is why I think a lot of people dislike mono green in general, because the game inherently favors strategies that can manipulate the most basic resources of the game. In mono green's case, mana production is our bread and butter. To stray a bit from mono green for a moment, for the sake of argument, let's just look at Tatiova Benthic Druid. 3 and green and blue for a legendary Merfolk Druid that's a 3/3 with landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, you gain 1 life and draw a card. This legend manipulates 2 of the most basic resources in the game, usually life total and card advantage, and relies you heavily for focusing on mana production. The fact that this legend isn't employing some new mechanic, but instead is relying on a powerful tried and true method of generating incredible value out of seemingly nowhere with a simple fetch land, or better yet, a well-timed skate shift, leads me to believe that there is incredible power in simplicity, and that if you're doing one thing better than all of the other colors, you probably should lean heavily on manipulating that resource. So is mono green basic? Is it too vanilla for some people to stomach? Why does elegant design need to be met with such disdain? Why does this already complicated game need to be more complicated? Better yet, does complicating the game more give you an advantage over your opponents somehow? I don't know the answer, honestly. I think people should be allowed to play the game however they want to. I have built complex 5-color decks and had fun with the strategies involved, but maybe it's because I'm older or because I'm a new father now that I'm appreciating simpler strategies these days. My final thoughts on why green is so strong come from recent meditations that I've been doing on crop rotation, and specifically why crop rotation is on the game changer list. Crop rotation is a 1 green, single green instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a land. Search a library for a land card, put that card onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. Crop rotation at its very cheapest is around $5 right now, while another tutor that is on the Game Changer list, Vampiric Tutor, is sitting around $54. Vampiric Tutor, again, for those of you unfamiliar, 1 black for an instant, search your library for a card, then shuffle, put that card on top, and you lose 2 life. Both Crop Rotation and Vampiric Tutors are instant speed tutors, and although you don't have to reveal what Vampiric Tutor goes for, because it can tutor for anything, I'd argue that in many ways Crop Rotation is just as, if not more powerful than Vampiric Tutor. So why is Crop Rotation a game changer, but Expedition Map isn't? The answer is speed, of course, and how much mana you're paying for the effect. I'd like to pause for a second here, because I really want to hit home why I think crop rotation is almost just as good as Vampiric Tutor, because it's putting it into play. If you're going to sacrifice that single green, that single forest to go get a Nykthos or an Ancient Tomb or something very, very powerful, maybe even you need like, what is it, Cavern of Souls, because you're fighting against blue. You can do it with crop rotation, and as long as it resolves, you're getting the land that you need when you need it. Could even be a fetch land. Being able to grab, as I mentioned, a Nykthos or Gaia's Cradle, Field of the Dead, a Glacial Chasm, or a Vesuva, just to name a few, add instant speed for 1 green mana is a lot of value for almost no cost. Sylvan Scrying is a close runner-up as land tutors go, but it's sorcery speed and it doesn't put the land onto the battlefield, and it also costs 1 more mana. Again, I want to pause and just think for 1 second. The land comes in untapped. So you're jumping ahead. You're stepping up, possibly a turn or 2 ahead of the rest of the board if you're grabbing like your Ancient Tomb. And maybe your deck really needs that Field of the Dead because you need some blockers at that point, and it's immediately going to trigger when it comes down. Or, if you're looking for that Gaia's Cradle, that $1,000 plus land, these are all great targets. And pretty much any target you're going for with crop rotation in your deck, it's going to immediately pay you back. I think, not to beat around the bush too much, crop rotation exemplifies green's raw power. As I said earlier, it puts the permanent you tutor for directly into play, much like any other game changer. Another game changer, excuse me. Natural Order does kind of the same thing, but for a creature. But it also illustrates and highlights green's strong direct connection to the land, which is why so many multicolor decks lean heavily on green to fix their colors. When you look at a lot of 5-color lists or 4-color lists that are in green, they're leaning really heavily on green for things like their Kadamas Reaches, their Cultivates, their crop rotations, things that are going to allow them to fix their lands and do what they want to do. Currently, there's now only 5 green game changers, and 4 of them are tutors. 3 of them being creature tutors, and the last being a land tutor, crop rotation, as I mentioned, which again highlights green's strong connection to the true permanent types most important to its strategy, land and creatures, which I think is a lot of the reason why people think that green is so basic, because it's play lands, play creatures. That's really the strength of green. And there's so many tutors in green that search for either of these permanent types. Common land tutors include Rampant Growth, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Crop Rotation, Sylvan Scrying, Nylea's Intervention, Sky Shroud Claim, Explosive Vegetation, Realms Uncharted, Harrow, Entis Restoration, Spring Bloom Druid. And these are just the ones that I can immediately recall from memory. Common creature tutors include Natural Order, Eldritch Evolution, Birthing Pod, Green Sun Zenith, Finale of Devastation, Fierce Empath, Survival of the Fittest, Yisan the Wanderer Bard, Worldly Tutor. Again, these are just the ones that I can easily recall, and these are probably some of the best ones. There's also ones that are very, they're either tied to a creature or they're more expensive. The cards and the concepts that I'm discussing in this episode are by no means exhaustive. I know that I'm going to miss some. But I honestly feel like a lot of this episode has been me trying to figure out a good answer to why is green so strong. But looking back, I don't think that I've nailed it down. I think I've just been scratching in the right direction, possibly. But as time passes and I further reflect on this, I'll probably find a better answer. I hope that this has been entertaining, that some of what I have said has gotten your brains firing a little. Thanks for muddling through all of it with me. Please, please, please hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think of this video. Maybe some things that I missed. Maybe some things that I didn't clarify. Maybe what you think about the question, why is it so strong? This week I also continued my tradition of brewing up a new legend. And this week I brewed up Arashi the Sky Asunder. I had to do this because I'm going in alphabetical order, and that's the constraint that I placed on myself. At first I honestly struggled what to come up with and what to do with this list, and eventually landed on a deck that focused on hating opponent flyers. I had no idea if this list would actually work in the wild. I really did. This was a struggle for me. I'm gonna be honest. It's mainly because Arashi is Sky Asunder is 3 and green for a legendary creature spirit 5/5. Pay X and a green, tap, Arashi the Sky Asunder deals X damage to target creature with flying. And it also has pay X, green, green, discard Arashi. Arashi deals X damage to each creature with flying. So, I mean, there's ways to pick it up potentially with things like Tamer Sabertooth. But there's not a whole lot of ways to bounce things in green, unless you can figure out a way to tutor for it. So I really just focused this list on hating flyers. It may not be the best strategy, but it was fun to kind of think about what you could do with a legend like this. You could probably slap this legend on a landfall deck and never play Arashi at all, and that would be okay. I mean, it would be, you could use it to deceive your opponent somehow. But that's all for now. Thanks for listening. Please like and or subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments, please. Cheers, everyone.